What would you say is the most rewarding part of growing within the restoration industry?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's always if anybody in business that manages business is always thrives on good results. The truth of the matter is it was actually seeing people grow as much and have them be successful that probably meant as much to me.
Hey guys, welcome to the Albi Afterhours live podcast. I'm on a mission to help restoration contractors grow and scale their restoration businesses. The purpose of this podcast is to bring restoration experts and to kind of chat about different topics of restoration. Today on the podcast, we are very honored to have Mr. Chris Hill. He is with JCMH Consulting. He's got over 20 years of experience within the restoration industry. Previously ran a very successful restoration company up on the West Coast, and now he serves the restoration industry and gives back to the industry by consulting. Welcome to the podcast, Chris. Did I miss anything off
Oh,
of
I,
that
I
little quick blurb?
no, I think you said it all. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is amazing. I love doing these podcasts. I think a lot of restorers can pick up a lot of things from podcasts like these. So, Chris, can we start off by, if you can tell me a little bit more about your background and your story? Like, let's start at why in the world did you get into restoration and what you did before restoration?
Sure, absolutely. I've actually got over 40 years of business experience in probably 5 or 6 different industries now. But in '93, I moved up to the northern part of the state where I live and found myself making major career changes. I actually worked with a company that sold used answering service hardware nationwide in Canada. So
Oh,
completely different because I was in construction. So I went from construction to telecom. And that worked out really well. My wife and I started a business that sells, things like that I'm wearing on my head. And then I found myself ready for something new. And I answered an ad for a director of marketing position for a company. Had no idea what it was for, answered it, and interviewed with the company, and it was a restoration company.
hmm,
Um, but I liked it. It seemed exciting. It seemed like it was really viable, and it really fit what I'd like to do. I love people. I love talking to people. I love being involved with people, and I think it's more the center of my gifts. So, interviewed, got offered less money there than I've worked for since I was 20 years old, and but took the job. And took it because of the vision that I saw that I knew I could go on to potentially run that company and maybe make a deeper impact. And so um, started working with that company in 2002 as their director of marketing. We were about a $3.7 million company at the point. We grew to almost $8 million in 2.5 years. I'd love to tell you
wow.
it was all me, Alex, but it wasn't. Um, there's a lot of amazing people there in that company, but we had the right timing and the right scenarios. You know how that growth goes. Um, and then at that point, we hired some consulting companies. We'd gotten a little out of balance, and they decided that they wanted to promote me. And I was a little hesitant at first because I really liked that marketing. But I went ahead and took the job and accepted the position, then went on to grow the company to be about $12 million. We had 4 locations, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty amazing to kind of really go on and really learn restoration at that level.
I see. So you started off in a sales and marketing role, and then eventually you got promoted to a general manager role, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, went
It's
through
awesome.
and handled all the back office accounting, did all of that, and then eventually just the general manager role. So
It's awesome.
I say just.
Just right. Well, that's typically like the ceiling within your restoration growth plan, unless, we're talking about larger mergers and acquisitions and like an actual C-suite, right? The general manager is probably the owner's right hand, right?
Yep, it's certainly it is, but it's still there's never a boring day in that position. And if anything, as I got a few more birthdays under my belt, I found my body didn't handle the stress of it as well, even though my mind was still ready to go. So had to pay
What
attention
would
there.
I see? What would you say is the most rewarding part of growing within the restoration industry?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's always, if anybody in business that manages business is always thrives on good results. And generally good results are certainly around making money and things like that. That's what you're in the business to do. But the truth of the matter is it was actually seeing people grow as much and have them be successful that probably meant as much to me.
I see. Awesome. And now you don't work for that restoration company right now, right? You're doing something completely different. Am I correct?
Just a little different. In
Okay.
2011, I started JCMH Consulting, and
Okay.
what was interesting is we had worked with many consulting companies for years, good ones. But I always found it interesting that 4 times a year they would show up at my office, they would talk to our people, look at our numbers, kick me in the backside, say, "Hey, get this done." And then when they'd leave, they'd say, "Hey, before we come back in 3 months, get these things done." And I always thought, what if I didn't know how to get those things done? And I wonder how many people out there in the industry don't know how to get these things done. So I thought, well, I think I could start a consulting business just helping people with the specific projects that they're looking to get done that either they don't have time to do or maybe they don't know how to do it. And my
Hmm.
experience was as such that I had done many of these things. So I thought, well, this would be a good fit that I'll start and I'm going to do a different pricing model than all the other consulting companies out there in that we're going to work by the hour. And somebody literally
Interesting.
can use me for 1 hour to complete a project for them. And, starting out small, that was the vision of it. It was to be project-based consulting. It quickly grew because many companies found out that I was really good with software. They found I was really good with the understanding of how to get people on it and take people through change. And so we became more of almost a software expert. I don't like being called that because to me, it's software. I'd rather you think of me as the behavior expert of understanding what needs to be done for that software to deliver. And it's funny, I work with a lot of different companies, and I'm always amazed by the what I call as the magic wand syndrome. Okay, where people think they're going to go buy your product, anybody's product, and have it magically transform their company. They're not going to do anything different, but the software all by itself is going to fix their company. And it never works that way. What it really works is when people really begin to understand what is needed, figure out how to get people to consistently deliver and perform that. And at that point, it really just becomes a beautiful thing the way it takes off. And so we work a ton helping companies with that environment. Interesting, the thing that happened next was that companies began to see that, wait a second, you know a lot more than just software. You could be a full-on restoration consultant. Yeah, absolutely. And so we'd get them on the software, and then we would be able to go to work helping them with everything from incentives to leadership to HR to operational processes, pretty much anything. And so it was fun,
Hmm.
a lot of fun.
Interesting. Interesting. So I think there's a couple of motifs that I want to dig a little deeper in, and I think the first one is behavior models. All right, let's take that for a second. Um, what do you talk about when you talk about behavior models, and what's good restoration behavior when it comes to people on the team and managing people, and what is bad restoration behavior?
Well, quite frankly, good and bad could be defined as consistent or inconsistent. Um,
Okay.
I could make it that simple. But to give you an example, everybody wants to buy a software or a tool, and they're looking to have accurate data. And I always
Okay.
ask people when I first meet them is, do you want to be able to trust the reports? And of course, they look at me like I'm crazy, and of course I want to trust my reports. And so
Hmm.
then I ask them one very powerful question, and that is, when you buy materials for a job, do you use some sort of religious method of purchasing it, like a purchase order or a work order? And without fail, I'm saying 90+% of the answers have always been no or sometimes.
Hmm.
And so that always surprised me because people are wanting accurate numbers, but they have no method of understanding whether really all their cost is in. They have nothing out there that says I committed to spend this much money, and yet they don't know if it's all in. I always ask, I say, how do you know if all your cost is in if you're not doing things like this? And of course, some people smugly will say, I know. And most people will go, well, we don't.
Hmm.
So
So
step one would be let's get an accounts payable process in place that literally says, this is how we spend money.
And why is that so hard? You mentioned 99% of people are like, we don't know. Why is it
Uh,
so hard to implement that?
well, I don't think it's hard to implement, but the reason why they've resisted doing something like that up front is because they really didn't know how to set it up or how to lead it. And they knew the second that they went to all their estimators and project managers and said, hey, I'm going to make you use a PO every time you go to Home Depot. Those people were going, I don't have time. But what I was able to do was write it for them. I give them the tools. And when I say tools, I literally will give them a PowerPoint training with their logo designed to be theirs for them to train everybody that spends their money, and then policies that back it up. And then we actually did the training. And in that meeting, I always loved when I could wait for one of those people to say, I don't have time. And then I would walk them through that they don't have time to be proactive up front, but they had time to take all those phone calls from the people in the accounting office asking them, hey, can I pay this yet? Or do you know what job this goes to? I said I used to love it. In our own company, we would send an email to 8 teams saying, is this yours? And
Hmm.
7 people would reply with no. And one person would go, yeah. The inefficiency of companies that they go through as a result of not having these behaviors in place is profound. And so when I've been able to give them the idea that if you follow this process, you don't get those phone calls, you don't get those interruptions, all of a sudden you get your time back. It became one of those things that said, yeah, we should do this. So as a consultant, my job wasn't not only to have the behaviors written that I could modify to fit that company, but I was also the one that had done it before and the one that was able to give everybody a reason to believe that they could do it.
Interesting. So, what I see as a key difference here between you and consultants that I've used in the past and I currently use, it seems like you're willing to give the system to the person as opposed to help consult and lead the person to discover the system themselves. Am I correct?
That's correct. Actually, I would say to my knowledge, there's some very good consultants out there, and most of them are looking top down. They're looking at financials, they're looking at owners, and there's some very good work that's being done in that area. But because I actually came up through the ranks, I was a coordinator at one point for 2 months. I know those jobs inside and out, and I understand how to motivate those people. As I literally wrote the systems that allowed them to understand that it's about me. That if I do these things, I'll have better reports. I'll have better things that allow me to feel good about what I do. And it became part of the culture of building people. So yeah,
Hmm.
I actually love that I'm one of the few guys that not only knows the software or the problems, but actually can roll up my sleeves, dive in with your people, and get it done.
And now, since you're used on an hourly basis, I know we're moving a couple steps further. Theoretically, anybody can use your services in addition to any other package that they're on.
Oh yeah,
Correct?
I yeah, actually I work with a ton of clients that have several other consultants on staff. And what I do is if I find out that they're using somebody for business consulting, then I'll work specifically within the behaviors and the software, and I'll stay in my lane. And I'll work actually very side by side with any of those people, and I'll help them. I'll learn where they're struggling. It can actually be almost a 1-2 punch to really benefit the client. So
Interesting.
I'm not threatened at all ever to work with any other consultants. I welcome it.
That's awesome. Now let's talk a little bit about software. You mentioned you work, you're an expert in the software area. So first off, do we believe that there's a lot of software offerings within the restoration space and they're all good for a specific restore? Can we agree on that?
Yeah, I would actually even say further, they're all designed to work. Okay,
Okay.
every single one of them. They don't have design flaws. They're all designed to work. The
Okay.
problem is do people understand what it takes to make that work?
Okay. And what does it take to make a software system work within your restoration company?
Generally speaking, it's really with some testing. If you don't have somebody like me that has been there before that can kind of guide you through that, a lot of it's trial and error. Is if I
Okay.
do this, what do my reports get? And you begin to start to see the cause and effect of behavior as it goes to your results. And for most people in this industry, some amazingly smart people that can look at things and say, I'm not getting the results I need, let me make an adjustment. We do it every day in Xactimate and everywhere else. And so the idea is same thing, is we literally have to be not to be afraid to dive into this and make mistakes. Push buttons, click things. That's what our software support's there for. Um, I equate buying software to buying a race car. People buy it because they want to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I'm amazed at how many people have bought this race car and they use it to go to the store and get milk in first gear, and they never race. And I always say to them, okay, you got on, you're entering jobs, you have some basic job numbers and stuff, but what's the next level? What's the next step? And I would say one of the things that help company really take this on is have somebody in the company that is that next step mentality, that is always thinking about what else will this do for us. Alex, nobody uses all the software and everything it can
Mm-hmm.
do, but man, if they can get 50% out of it, they're going to have an amazing tool in front of them.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree. I mean, think about how all the core restoration functions could be done in like Excel or Dropbox or Google Drive, right? But obviously, if you implement something like, Albi Dash, Restoration Manager, PSA, now you have a lot easier and a central location that kind of handles those basics. But
yeah,
then if you take it a step further and you find a platform that has things like automation or hooks up to a BI tool, which we'll talk about a little bit later, then you're at that, next level.
yeah.
So what is that next level? What is, like, if we were to say, okay, all software companies here, right? And let's just say the basics, right? Driving to the grocery store. What is the next level? What are the key features or key things that you need from your software to be able to sprint with?
Um, to me, I always tell people that everybody races into software for all the features and benefits. KPIs is a big buzzword, and
Hmm.
and I'm not a big fan of a lot of those because I think that they have a tendency to remind people to do things they already know they didn't do,
Hmm.
and more or less, eventually, if it's done heavily, ignore the software. So
Okay.
I like to go to fundamentals, and look for some of the basic information. So obviously, everybody's date driven. You got to use your dates properly for reports to be accurate. But there's a lot of compliance tools out there that are built that allow us to build and just maybe get our hands wrapped around how do we want to approach a certain kind of work. So I'm not against that. I just am careful not to use so many email reminders to tell people, hey, you forgot to do this. Um, and so I really think that the fundamentals is get down the basic things, understand what the dates do, how it drives the software, and then get consistent at those things. One of the best ways to get consistent is to have consistent measurement. And the biggest failure that I see for companies is they don't have people in place, managers, if you will, leaders, if you will, that are running accountability checks to verify that we're actually doing these things. And I always tell people that I had a 4 week, I had a scenario where our data was way out of balance, and we finally committed to have a 4 week goal of getting it perfect. And every week I'd run reports, I would highlight, I would coach, and at the end of that 4 weeks, we were perfect. It was beautiful. It was like the skies
Hmm.
parted, the angels were singing. It was a beautiful thing. And at that point, I made a huge mistake as a leader. And I told all of our teams, I says, guys, great. Now you know what I want. You guys have demonstrated you could do it. I'll meet with you every month. Now,
And
Alex,
the ropes were left loose, and what happened?
everything, it was worse than when we started our 4 week exercise.
Wow.
Okay. And at first I was like, how dare them? They defied me. They knew what I wanted. It was like me. Great leader move, Chris. Um, so I realized that for 4 weeks, I made what I wanted hot and they responded. And that's what we do in this industry. The restoration industry has always got more plates spinning than we can keep spinning. And we're always going to be paying attention to what's hottest. And for 4 weeks, I made it hot. And then I let it go ice cold. And it's not that they didn't care. It's not that they weren't great people. It's that all of a sudden they went to things that were hotter and it failed.
So
So,
how can we make software and the implementation of software hot, Chris?
well, implementation is different than software, but But it first starts with the desire to really to take on those features, and everybody says, "Hey, I want everything." But oftentimes we get on, and first is get our job entry in, our customer entry in, our marketing data in place, and our accounting straight. And then from there, we can start thinking about things like scheduling and things like equipment management and those things. And so some people try to take on too much too soon. They burn out, they fail, and then it becomes a flop. And literally nobody in the company believes it anymore. Okay. And then all of a sudden round two comes and say, we're going to do it this time. And it fails again. They're destined to fail. It's because we don't have people that are committed up front to say that my job is to continue to drive this. Yes, we're going to get busy with storms. We're going to get busy with work. Everybody's going to go crazy, but somebody has to keep driving the consistency.
Got it.
And for smaller companies, it's usually the owner that's depended on to be done that. And those are the people that struggle the most, not because they're not good. It's because they're wearing so many hats that it's too easy for them to be taken out of consistent behavior.
Interesting. So I wanted to kind of segue now into good business decision making. I wanted to talk a little bit about, right? We have all this data. We have all this data in one spot. How can we make good business decisions, and what should good business decisions be backed upon or backed by?
Well, I always say good business decisions are made on sound data. And
Okay.
so what is sound data? To me, sound data, for the most part, means that our dates management are accurate and we're looking at all of our jobs in the right place in the reports. So examples would be that we have jobs that are incurring costs should be in WIP. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there may be some exceptions to that, but so often I'll come across people's data and I can see jobs in pending that have been done for 6 months. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so then they want to go run a sales report, they want to run a WIP report, and I go, you have no way of knowing whether any of this is sound. And so first things first is really understanding that. I love to then take that information and look at my operational efficiencies. In other
Okay.
words, how much we're touching things. I love to look at how well we're selling. So often people will say, "I need more marketing," and they have the opportunities. They're just not selling well enough. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I love some of the stuff that you've done, Alex, and where you're really coaching the sales side of it, because the opportunities are hard to get sometimes, and we spend a lot of money to position ourselves for them. But our industry as a whole does a terrible job of sales development and actually
Mm-hmm.
teaching people to sell.
I
Okay,
can't agree with that more.
and then the vendor programs would tell us don't sell because we're just going to make you order takers. Okay, and so and I'm not against any of those environments, but the reality of it is that we can never lose sight of selling in our industry, and we must be dedicated to developing people for that so that we can use the information to see how well we're doing.
Couldn't agree more. I think
I know.
that the stronger we can get in independent restoration sales, the stronger we can get as an industry as a whole, right? And there's, obviously the industry is one-sided. If we look at the industry right now, if we look at, the insurance ecosystem, and the only way the contractors can get stronger and have a stronger voice is by learning how to sell. Because at the end of the day, marketing and sales is what drives the industry as a whole, right?
Yeah,
So,
and sales, learning to sell doesn't just give you independence from vendor programs and being held hostage to those things. It also anchors your profit. And I've seen
mhm,
so many people that just get their profit completely annihilated because they don't know how to anchor their value in the sell. And so
100%.
it's very important that they understand that on the upfront sales process, they're building all of the anchor points so that their profit can stay. And so
Interesting.
really, I think there's two prices being paid as a result of that.
Very interesting that you bring that up. Now, before we got on the sales tangent, we were talking kind of, reactiveness of the restoration industry. Tell me more about being proactive and reactive, and how you think being proactive is actually something that every restorer should do.
Well, what's interesting is we live in this world that's called a reaction-based business. We're
Okay?
emergency services contractors, and I see so many people that refuse to plan and execute anything because they just expect to react all day. but the efficiencies they lose are huge, and they're never really on target with any of their focus. They're just at the beck and call of whatever the reaction needs to be. I'm a big
So
fan go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I'm a
I
big
thought you
fan of
finished. I was like,
I'm a big fan of planning and executing your reaction. And so I'll
okay,
give you an example. We figured out that we wanted to get 3 water jobs a day.
okay,
Okay, but I used to laugh because we'd dispatch our crews in the morning, and then that first job would come in, and we'd be sending emails to 6 different people trying to figure out how we're going to cover it. And nobody wanted to leave their jobs to go cover it, and it was almost like a fight to go do the thing that we're in business to do. And so I rolled out a plan that says, guys, we're going to do our ABC plan. Every day we're going to have a plan A, plan B, plan C. We're going to, before you leave here, we're going to understand exactly how we're executing the next 3 jobs. There's no arguing. All we have to do is get the call, click a button, send a couple emails, and everything's dispatched. And now we're going to execute our reaction. And it began to drive efficiency for us. It actually worked really well to start thinking about things, to say, look, our business is fairly repetitive in that things happen to us all the way. There's no reason why we can't begin to get better at how we react.
I completely agree with that. We got to the point, and if we go on a more larger scale, we got to the point where we could predict the entire year and certain metrics that we were going to hit an entire year. We got to the point where we predicted when surges would come, and we set aside specific protocols with how we were going to handle those surges. And I think a lot of restorers are just taking it day by day, waiting for the phone to ring and things like those. But there's a lot of indicators that if you can track properly, you can see, hey, I'm running out of work and I'm going to have a dry month in July because on reconstruction or maybe on mitigation, right? And you can make those decisions. Is there
Our
a way you help with that?
Well, sure. I mean, to me, I appreciate that you were able to forecast that much ahead. I've done some long-term analyses on companies where the only thing I could figure is there was no trend.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you in the company I ran, October was always our worst month, and people would panic. We'd think the world's going away, and we go,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh yeah, it's October."
Makes
And
sense.
November would come, and all of a sudden work would come back in, and it was just one of those things that happened to us. But I'm a big fan of using the data to look at that information, learn our comforts. The BI tools that we use oftentimes can demonstrate it very quickly. And so
What's BI, Chris? What does BI mean, and how does that impact a restorer?
the BI is business intelligence, and it's basically a platform of analytic tools that allows us to extract data from any software platform and put it in a framework that allows anybody that's looking at it to come to quicker conclusions and decisions about what is needed and how we should react.
And if
I'm
I'm
a
not
really big fan.
mistaken, you actually built a BI tool. I mean, you didn't actually code a BI tool, but you used Power BI by Microsoft to build a BI model for restoration contractors. So that way they have certain things that they should be looking at, right?
Yeah, we actually built a set of templates of slides in that Power BI that are based around my behavior models and what I consult companies to drive in the way of their knowledge and their information. And we offer it to our clients, and it's pretty amazing to see what happens. First thing that happens is people really stop printing because
Stop
they
what?
no longer printing.
Printing.
Okay.
Okay.
I had one client that had 3 biz hubs that ran pretty much nonstop all day. They barely have one printing now
Okay.
because all of a sudden the speed at which they were able to see information no longer required printing massive reports and having to go through that every day or every week.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you show us some of the things that you perhaps have built? And forgive me if I'm intruding on the secret sauce here.
Oh no, I'd be happy to share it. It's very fun to share that. So okay. So if you can see this slide, this is an example of our Power View product. That's what we call it. And as you can see, just on the first page, you can get an idea of a lot of information based on just top-down information. How many opportunities are received, how many are sold, started, basic information that I might be able to pull. So here we are 4 months into the year. I could easily take this number and say, well, we're a $12 million company. Are we on goal or not? Oops, no. Or if I wanted to project forward, if my months were fairly consistent, I could project forward and say, well, what are we pacing for? And I could say, well, it looks like we're pacing for about $9 million worth of work. Okay,
Hmm.
so great information here. Ability to drill down and actually see detail if we want to, um, and see what makes up those numbers. Graphs that show things like what our dollar amounts are that are closed and who's doing the work, what kind of margins we're hitting, what our divide is by job type, where we're getting our work from. These are quick slides that allow us to do analytics on people, work, profit centers, the whole works. And so just as an example, you mentioned a few minutes ago trends, and this is in the way, so let me move that over. Some people say, well, I want to be able to go back and I want to look at trends and I want to see several years of information. So in this situation, I can literally come in here and say, well, geez, what were our sales like over the last 4 years? I keep
Hmm.
clicking on the wrong button. Click on this one. And I can begin to start to see how many jobs, what the dollars were, and I can begin to see when we're getting our work. So,
Interesting.
a quick way that we can see patterns. If I said, well, geez, I'd like to see our water work. And so you can come in here and look at water and be able to start to see that says, well, this company looks like they're fairly busy in winter, and then maybe a spike in the middle of the year, and then everything else is pretty even keel. And so you
Hmm.
can go through here and gather information very quickly.
Hmm.
Okay.
So all of these are obviously anybody can go get Power BI, hook up their software to it, and play around if they have the know-how. But what you have built here is a template around your behavior models of different things that you recommend for restoration contractors to look at, right? So if they want, the restoration contractor can come to you, say, Chris, I don't know what I should be looking at. You come and say, all right, here's exactly the things you should be looking at. And you're able to hook up their data from any CRM that they're using into this, correct?
Absolutely. It's pretty amazing at how often I show this to people, and without them really knowing what they wanted to see, they see this and they go, "This is what I want."
Yep.
Things like capture ratios. I mentioned we should be studying capture ratio. So I have tools that not only allow me to see what we're averaging, I can do it by job type, I can do it by where we're getting work, and we can really begin to understand our business more. I had one client that 30% of their business was requiring 50% of the resources. After a
Wow.
while, they began to realize that wasn't the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, so they made a change and cut out that customer. And so a lot of information. We mentioned KPIs. To me, I don't need KPIs if I can just see the information the way I want to see it. And so we give companies the ability to do it. Forecasting work. I love to be able to know how much work we have to look at, how much work we have to write, and everybody sees a pending number and they go, wow, I have a lot of work in pending. But to me, this number, without having some idea of what the chance of selling it is empty. But this number means everything. So there's a lot of people that think that they have metrics to drive business decisions, but we're going to actually give it to them in a way they've never seen it before that is
Hmm.
even going to be more profound. And so
Interesting.
love to look at this. I talked about operational efficiencies. And to me, I love to look at time frames to say, well, how many days are we touching jobs? Okay. Here's a company that over the lifespan of a water job to accounts receivable is taking 10 days to touch jobs. I've seen companies at 40 days, 50 days. And if we can move them from 50 days to 10 days or even 20 days, and we can give their people 30 days back of their time, that allows them to be better at what they do, allows them to be able to handle more. It also allows them to have balance. So it's pretty exciting to see people when they begin to see that not only can I see where I'm at, but I also can see where I can improve.
Really cool. So this is essentially to kind of, dumb it down even more. A doctor's going to look at like an EKG screen, an X-ray screen, a CT scan, and things like those to be able to give a person a diagnosis. A restorer can look at all of these metrics and then make business decision based on all of these. If the data is there, if it's accurate, and if it's organized in the proper way. Am I correct?
It is correct, but it's amazing, Alex, is that the production people have actually
Mm-hmm.
embraced this tool for their own improvement. And people ask me all the time, how did you get people to behave in the software consistently? And I always said that I make it about them. Okay. So to me, if I go to you, Alex, and I say, hey, Alex, you're an estimator, and here's my expectations of you, you're only going to be compliant to that when it's convenient for you. But if I can
Mm-hmm.
come to you and find out what makes you tick and find out what your goals are, and I find out a way that I can support you and I can give you, quote, your mirror for your to see your reflection, okay, I promise you, when people see their own reflection and they'll be more accountable to it. If they want to be great, they'll see how they can be great, and they'll use these tools like never before.
And they can look into the mirror any day. It's
Yeah,
not quarterly or weekly or monthly when I come to you and say, "Hey, you're doing a great job," or "You're not." Every single day, I can look in that mirror and say, "Oh, I'm looking good," or "I'm looking bad," or "I'm in the middle." Right?
yeah, right. And a lot of
Interesting.
software has great dashboards these days. So
Hmm.
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, but a lot of times for people to see some of the real meat, they need to run reports. With
Hmm.
this tool, it kind of gives them both the dashboard and the identifiable data right in front of them.
Very interesting. I love what you've built. I truly do.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a firm believer in what you've done. So,
it's it's been a lot of fun, and I will tell people that true growth in companies is from individuals figuring out where their sweet spot is and just taking it on. Um, that's to me, leadership is my passion probably overall. I think it's the most underutilized and undeveloped item we have in our business.
hmm.
And I can almost equate every problem every business has as to how they led. And so to me, I'm a big proponent of driving leadership development in companies. But what they don't realize is that water tech that you hire had better be a leader, because at any given point, that person may be the only one on the customer's job, and to them, they are your brand.
100%.
They have to be able to lead. So to me, I don't think of leadership just as GMs or top positions. I think it is every person you hire. They need to
Yep.
understand how to lead themselves. They need to know how to read the reports. And so
Yeah. And to
part
add,
of how
oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say that's part of how you get them to really embrace the leadership, embrace the behaviors, embrace software, is when they
Hmm.
realize that this is my mirror.
I couldn't
This
agree
is
more.
this is how somebody told me once. They said, "Well, you're just building the machine. You're going to micromanage me with the machine." And I said to them, I said, "Well, it could either be your machine, your tool to be exceptional with, or it can be my tool to
Hmm.
micromanage you with. But I promise you, I won't micromanage you long."
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of it is to me, I love it when people get that.
In all of the businesses I've run in the past, every single employee understands their role within the bigger ecosystem and understands why them hitting their metrics or them doing their job affects the bigger picture. And then they all have a way that they can go, like you said, and see whether or not they've hit that metric or not. And they know when they've screwed up and they know when they did things great. And I completely agree with you. And, the mentality of trying to micromanage or set up these rigid systems like I'll give you an example like don't let the project move on to the next phase unless it has xyz. Well, what if the project needs to do that? You need to have flexible systems, and you need to train your people to just know what they have to do and know how every single decision that they make impacts the bigger picture overall. So I love
Yeah,
this.
and I
Absolutely
think
love it.
that's part of what hurts companies on consistent behavior is because there's always that yeah but on
Hmm.
every scenario that it's just real easy to kind of give up and say okay. And I believe that there's ways you can provide interim communication within jobs to kind of identify those yeah buts and still
Hmm.
move. Yeah.
And instead of trying to buy like the ideal software that's going to do it all for you and kind of compensate training people, try to compromise and have the software do what the software needs to do and not train people. I'd rather have better trained people that know what they do and they can do it on pen and paper, and software just makes life easier, right? So I agree with you 100% there.
Yep. I
So go ahead. We're so engaged. We're powwowing here, right? um, I want to wrap up now by just kind of talking about your involvement within the Albi Gap program. For our listeners out there that don't know what the Albi Gap program is, it's the Growing with Albi program. For those of you who think it's corny, Zach Martin came up with the name. He's one of our account executives. For those of you who love the name, I came up with the name. So, but the premise is we want to be more than just a software company. We want to leverage a network of experts to our current customers to help them accomplish just that. So, if you are an Albi customer, you get access to Chris Hill alongside many other experts, and you have a certain time frame that you can utilize Chris free of charge, powwow on any of the topics that we've talked about here or any others. And then ultimately, if you want to use Chris and you align with Chris and you want to use him as a client, great. If you want to say, thank you, Chris, I appreciate the information, we'll move forward, that's absolutely acceptable too. So, Chris, tell me more about your involvement, I guess, real quick with the GAP program. Anything that I missed on that?
yeah. It's interesting. I really I love meeting people and understanding their problems and seeing if I can help them. And it's interesting is yes, I have a business called and I do consulting and I bill for it. But the reality of it is that I enjoy it enough to where if somebody doesn't become a customer and I help them anyways, that's awesome.
Awesome.
And so one of the things I offer you and offer many environments out there is if somebody wants to kick tires with me, or if they want to take advantage of some free consulting time from me, we'll give you an hour, maybe more time on a go-to meeting like this to just go through what you have. And if you want to see what I do, I can show you what I do. But the idea of it is I'm willing to give up my time um, for nothing more than to be part of this industry and serving this industry. Uh, Alex has become a friend, and I like what you're doing over there. And so, to me, the opportunity to serve your clients, to be able to help them in any way, is awesome. And as I said, is like, guys, I'm fortunate and blessed with a lot of business. So if 50 of you call me tomorrow and said, "Hey, can I start?" I may kind of hold my breath and go, "Well, not in that order." But the idea of it is if you need help and I can help you, nothing would give me more pleasure than to be able to help you. If I get to be a consultant with you and actually get to have a billing financial relationship with you, that's great too. But if it never happens, well, there's oftentimes people will say, "I appreciate the hour and a half, Chris. Can I call you if I have more questions?" Absolutely, call me. Because this business is about this big and everybody knows everybody. And the one thing that I know is that I've been blessed with abundance and I just want to make sure I always give. So,
That's awesome.
and one other point is oftentimes people don't know this, but I actually have clients that become part of our customers. Um, they get a Dropbox from me that has our behavior model in place. Okay, and so some people literally will sign our agreement, which costs you nothing, just so that they can get in and have our Dropbox. And there's a
Mhm.
little work that goes into it on my part, but I don't mind. And it's not like proprietary information. I'll share it with anybody because I
Awesome.
want them to have good business.
That's very generous of you. And I think I couldn't agree with you more that I think um, everything happens for a reason and things come back, right? Like I've noticed in my journey now becoming a restoration vendor that the more I give, things just kind of come back. But the joy of giving is huge. And, that's why we do this podcast. That's why we do Albi After Hours and all these things, is because I genuinely want to change the industry. And, like you said, abundance is abundance. We're the most rapidly growing software company out there. I'm doing really great, but that's not why I do things. No amount of money could push me away from my core values and from my mission here. So but yeah, this was awesome. This was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you for taking an hour almost out of your day to participate in this. Is there anything else, last kind of comments or notes that you kind of want to add?
No, I just I love to watch advancements in our business, in our industry, and it's been fun watching Albi where, and I'm excited for you guys' future. And
Thank you.
I'm proud to be part of this group of people here. So thank you.
Thank you. You got front row seat, Chris. You always know that.